My big suggestion to students, particularly through high school, is
You can do anything.
Choose it for you, not for
It
them.
is worth it.
Just focus on the next
Doesn't
step.
matter what you're doing.
Don't be afraid.
As long as you're doing
That
something.
is such good advice.
I don't think I could see myself doing
It's a
anything else.
challenging life.
Student nights, Wednesday to
Oh,
Saturday.
I worked on that house.
I racked up every single dollar of debt that I
I
possibly
think there's
could.
a lot of pressure on high school.
Yeah,
kids
I just
these days,
love
right?
working outside.
And if money is something that you care a lot
In
about,
hindsight, that
I've
was,
also been a very indecisive
But you
person.
keep looking for roads that have been less
it
travelled.
was just that moment that I knew what I wanted to do. So nothing else is going to change that.
Welcome to the guest speaker.
Today we have Dr. Riley Elliott, shark scientist, writer, producer, presenter, and one of the leading voices in marine conservation. Known globally as Sharkman, Riley has spent more than a decade researching sharks, communicating science through mainstream media, and helping people better understand the role these misunderstood predators play in our oceans. Riley is the creator and presenter of multiple documentaries for Shark Week, as well as productions for the BBC and National Geographic. He's also an adventurer, surfer, diver, and storyteller whose career has taken him around the world, from free diving with great white sharks in South Africa to researching shark populations here in New Zealand. And we're excited to have such an acclaimed guest with us today. You were originally born in Canada before moving to New Zealand as a child, and you grew up surrounded by wilderness and adventure. Your passion for the ocean developed through surfing, diving, and exploring the natural world. But like many people, your early perception of sharks was shaped by fear and popular culture, especially films like Jaws. Instead of avoiding that fear, you leaned into it. You completed a Bachelor of Science with honours in zoology, followed by a master's degree in marine science with distinction before earning a PhD at the University of Auckland. And as we've been discussing in the background, if you're on YouTube, you'll see those certificates. Along the way, you combined academic research with real-world experience, studying endangered dolphins in Fiordland, travelling extensively through Central America, and eventually heading to South Africa to work directly with great white sharks. Since then, you have become one of the world's most recognised shark researchers and science communicators. You have helped influence conservation policy, including contributing to the ban of shark finning in New Zealand, raising public funding for shark research, and you use television and media to bring marine science to the audiences of millions around the globe. But sharks are only part of the story. You often describe sharks as a catalyst creature, a way to capture attention and open bigger conversations about ocean ecosystems, sustainability, and the future of our planet. Your work is driven by a belief that science should be accessible to everyone and that conservation succeeds when people feel connected to the natural world. Today's podcast is for students interested in marine science, environmental protection, sustainability, oceanography, or wildlife management, and probably many other things. Your journey shows how higher education can connect directly to the real world with exploration and adventure far beyond the walls of an office. This is a story about turning fear into purpose, passion into impact, and science into something that truly connects with people. And can I say, communicating with you, even just before the show, apparently there's shark tags in front of you. We got an email, Grace and I, weeks ago. Sorry, didn't reply to your email. I've been on a shark tour, whatever it was. Like, what a cool job. This is going to be absolutely fascinating. Welcome to the guest speaker, Riley. We've just discussed a little bit about school too. Can we take you back to school? What you enjoyed about it, what you didn't enjoy about it, and the subjects you leaned into?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for that introduction. It kind of gave me goosebumps, like tracking back. I just turned 40 recently, and it's a bit of a, milestone for anyone who grows up. But to hear all that hard work, I guess it's like it's worth it because if I had to look back at when I started living kind of the dream that I thought wouldn't be possible, but I'm doing it, and it is so cool. And it does start from, I guess, getting that advice, that encouragement at school at a young age, from I guess kind of like 14 onwards when you got to start thinking about stuff. And yeah, I grew up in Hamilton, as landlocked as you get in New Zealand, but luckily it's not far from the coast. And grew up in Tamaheri and went to Barclay Intermediate and then Hillcrest High. And yeah, it was really the freedom of choice, I think, at school. People think of it as prescribed, but it's such a privilege to have so many subjects taught to you And if you've got good teachers around you, they see which subjects, tick your box and the ones that you're enthused about. And I was really lucky, at school, I love biology. It's just fun. Everyone loves David Attenborough, as we've seen recently. And that's because the biological world is so fascinating. And, for me, it was just coming from playing outside and wanting to know more. I had a lot of those books that are like, why? Tell me more. Like, how does that thing work? Why does it look that way? And Mr. Chibnall was my biology teacher, and he was very encouraging. He could see that I enjoyed it, but he said, gave me a good piece of advice. He said, in seventh form, though, you're going to have to do statistics, because in biology, it's a foundation. You're going to hate it. You might love it, but you're probably going to hate it. You're good at maths, but statistics is a hard grind, but it's a necessary proofing of ideas in biology. So like simple steps like that at the end of high school were key, and I guess giving me direction. But the biggest thing I say to everyone is, like, especially young people, is not to narrow your vision. Like, I came from a family with parents who are just like, find out what you like, what you do, what's your passion. And it's a bit of a cliche thing, to follow your passion. You got to add a lot of hard work in there to be successful. But I tried everything. I was really enthused by geography. I got top of New Zealand in geography. I got top of New Zealand in woodwork, because, I built this cabin that I'm sitting in, which is my office and most of my house. And I'm not a builder. So I really liked practical things and things with my hands, things with my brain, things outside. And, school offered a lot of those. Outdoor education was another huge one that Hillcrest High was infamous for. So all those things kind of gave me a real broad breadth at high school. I was doing geography, woodwork, OE, statistics, biology, I think chemistry, and, a lot of the other foundational ones like English and maths. And so the bottom line is, like, keeping it broad. And I took that approach all the way through my academic career as well.
Can you tell me, because you touched on something, you said there are a whole lot of books at home, because what I'm becoming more fascinated with as well is a lot of parents listen in and they're looking for little tidbits of how to be good parents. Do you pick anything? I mean, clearly, top of New Zealand in geography, shame, Grace. Were there things your parents were doing that you would put a shout out to that maybe now you recognize as you're a real academic? Obviously books. What else?
Yeah, I think more importantly, as a parent now, I've got a nearly 3-year-old girl, and, I always get comments from other parents like, man, she's good at speaking. She's got such good linguistic skills for her age. And we were taught in some parenting class that reading to your kids was a massive education tool. And she'll digest 6 children's books a night and in the morning. And I really feel that reading is a huge part. And I was not a good reader. I did not like reading, but when I got my teeth into something I enjoyed, like the Hatchet Return, Hatchet Winter, those, outdoor survival kind of stories, I just digested them. And so I think it's about, again, I got like 100 books in my kids' room, and she will pick which one she likes. And in there's some huge encyclopedias of animals, and she memorized every single animal's name, and she was 2 at the time. And now she's into the Peppa Pigs and all those things. But the point is giving options, and options beyond the scope of what you think a kid might be capable of, because, you got to give the opportunity for curiosity to blossom. And, the hardest part for a parent is that takes time and effort, but it's truly worth it. I've seen it in my 2.5-year-old that if you give them that time and that ability to grow their curiosity, it will blossom. And I'm still doing it today. I have to read a lot as a scientist. I read a lot of papers, but they're in the areas I'm interested in, which makes it easy. So I think the big lesson out of that is you will pursue the things that you enjoy and are curious about, rather than force feeding prescriptive, ideas. Your kid has to be a lawyer, or a doctor, which the rest of my family are. But like for me, I was curious about animals. And so I think just seeing the curiosity glint in a child's eye, and then, keep giving those opportunities around that until the point where they leave for university and an academic does it for you. That's a parent's responsibility, but it's hard and it takes time and effort.
Yeah. Okay, so you're sitting there at Hillcrest, you're doing well, obviously. When was your process thought in terms of what you'd do next, and where did you go to seek that advice? Obviously, having academic parents helps. You've got a link already. Some kids won't have that. But yeah, what was that? How did that go for you?
I think it was interesting because back then I was the last year of School C, and School C was very much, they literally moved the bell curve of grades to fail half the people so that they would go into trades, and the other half would get the university entrance to go to university. And in a way it was kind of barbaric, but in a way it was very good because it drove people to what they actually were probably more interested in. I had a lot of friends who weren't interested in school, but became, like, now are owners of building companies and bought more houses than I've ever bought, and are doing incredibly well because they started at a young age. Academia is a hard route because you don't earn any money for a very, very long time because you're a student. But I think what was good is my parents just always said to me, do what you're interested in. And university was an opportunity to continue school, to continue the privilege of being taught things. And again, I didn't go to university and do one thing. I knew I liked sciences. So I was majoring in geology, geography, zoology, ecology, and botany. And what's good is as you get through your years at university, you eventually narrow it down to one particular subject, which was zoology for me in the end. But I love geology. It was incredible. And I pursued it until a point where I kind of got bored because it started getting into microscopes and small stuff rather than volcanoes and mountains. And so then I'd pivot into the next thing that kept me outdoors more often. But it was really just trying everything is the biggest thing. Like I'm going on a school tour talk this next month, and the biggest thing I say to kids, especially in high school, is like, just take the pressure off, man. Like, that you don't need to know who you are, what you do, or what you're going to do, because you don't. And the best advice I ever said was do a gap year, go travel the world, because that's how you figure out who you are, like what kind of person you are. Are you risk averse? Are you risk prone? Are you adventurous? Are you not? And what things interest you? Is it culture? Is it food? Is it music? Is it whatever? So the recipe for me, and luckily my parents always, prescribed it, was just, we don't care what you do. Like, do whatever you want to do, but you need to work hard at that. You need to put the time in if you want to be successful at it. But it's much, much easier to do that hard work if you're enjoying what you are doing. And I think that is the key recipe. I've read this book, Jay Shetty, Think Like a Monk, and he says there's these 4 quadrants of what people are. One quadrant, the best one that you could ever be in, is you're passionate about it and you're good at it. And that's the dream spot to be in. The other end of it is you're not passionate about it, and you're not good at it. And around the sides of those are like what most people sit in, which is you're not really that into it, but you're good at it. And that's what most people's jobs are. And it's really hard to deviate away from something that pays you, even if you don't like it. But it is far more rewarding and generally beneficial if you can find something you're good at and you like it. So that's the sweet spot you really want to be running into. And the good at it part comes later, because that's just work. Finding what you like is the key part.
You actually speak very much like Di Henwood. His mum particular sent him to uni just to broaden his mind, that it was the learning and to be clever about, as he said, I can't be funny if I don't know stuff. And so, yeah, can you talk me through, because we've had a number of kids, your zoology and your marine science. What do you learn about? Because some kids might not end up diving with sharks like you later, but what does that degree look like? What sort of stuff are you learning about?
It's a good question. Like, you do a lot of fundamentals at the start of a Bachelor of Science, for example. It doesn't matter what you're going to get into. You do biology, like how does cells work? How does like the body get created? Like, you do simple things like you go and sit at the aviary and look at a Kia in a cage and monitor its behavior for 3 hours. And then you apply some statistics to it. You start learning little foundational things of how to observe the natural world and how to quantify it and answer questions that you may have. And you do a lot of reading and a lot of, I guess, critical thinking is what university's about. Like, you can't just go, oh, why does that bird do that? It's like you got to break it down into a question and answer, theory, hypothesis that you can test and then get an answer out of. So luckily you get taught all of that, and it's fascinating to learn because you're getting taught by people who've done it their whole lives. And the best thing about it that I've enjoyed is it's constantly evolving. There's one way of thinking 30 years ago. Now it's a totally different world. To the point with some of the shark science I'm doing now, I'm not even attempting to address the data. I'm aligning with the university to get a new student because the way and the computer methods that they can do is far beyond my teachings. And so it's ever evolving. So it was really cool because it starts simple. How does a volcano work? It literally goes back to some of the things you did at like science fairs at primary school. And you literally do some of those things. You use the baking soda and the water and then you make the volcano. And it's to reignite, I guess, that childhood curiosity of how things work. And then you get into more, fundamentals of it and the science of it. But the scientific degree was great because it was really just looking at how does the world around you work. And then the subjects that you choose then start specifying into different areas, and you can pick them up and drop them off because at the end of the day, university is made up of points that you get from each paper, and you just need a certain amount of points at the end. So you can really pick and choose a lot and evolve as you grow and as your mind grows.
And were you doing, like you mentioned, some of the courses were taking you outside. How much, going back to particularly like their undergrad stage, because that's where a lot of these people will be thinking, were you also going on your own missions to do stuff in the water, fishing, scuba diving? Like, what did the ratio of your day or weeks, I guess, look like?
It's a really good question. We had a motto at my flat, which was like work 60% of the time at 100%. The other 40% was going surfing. Because I had friends that would just grind it all the time. And if you're grinding at one thing all the time, you get saturated, you get bored, you get fatigued. And if there's no replenishing of what makes you happy or energized, you burn out. And so it was really good. We'd work really, really hard, but then we'd ensure that we went and played, so to speak. And in Dunedin, where I ended up, the surf was fantastic. It's some of the best in the world, and the wildlife is some of the best in the world. So, 40% of my time at uni, I was traveling that whole Otago Peninsula, and, you're getting, charged by sea lions, you're seeing yellow-eyed penguins, you're wondering why the water turned red because of krill. There's all these questions that were always, stirring up. And I have this saying that like, you can only sit on your surfboard for so long without wondering what was going on underneath you. And that's when the diving started coming in. And a big part of what I did, which enabled me to take opportunities that would arise, was I wasn't just, dicking around, so to speak, in the background and just surfing. I was getting qualifications like my scuba cert, my freediving cert, my skipper certificate. I ended up in uni holidays instead of like not doing any jobs and bumming off my parents or like doing a job that I didn't like. I was driving tour boats in the Coromandel, and so I was seeing all this cool geology. So I was able to apply that into my talks to the tourists. It was a glass bottom boat. So you could describe what you were seeing, the animals, and so to speak. So it was very holistic, I guess, what my hobbies and what I was studying, I guess, for an occupation. They worked really well together. And again, that's just kind of pursuing like the things I liked. But also the hard work of it, which was not just sitting at home, my parents' couch on the uni holidays playing video games. It was going out there and doing things that, added to my personal repertoire of what I liked, what I was exposed to, and what I was good at.
So you went to Otago for your most of your uni, then Auckland for your PhD. Is that how it worked?
Yeah. So uni, you kind of like pick where you want to go based on the lifestyle a little bit. Like I always had the dream of like, in my gap year, for example, after high school, I went to Oxford University and taught there as like a student teacher. And that was really cool because Oxford's obviously like the pinnacle of the world's universities. And, I wasn't in there in the Harry Potter rooms, like learning university stuff. I was teaching 5-year-olds how to read. And, but then on my like days off, I'd wander the university, go into the library there, see all this cool stuff. And I always had a dream, to go to a big Ivy League university, but that's quite a hard thing to achieve, especially like internationally. And we've got great universities in New Zealand. So Otago stood out to me because it had a really cool student life, which I think is critically important. Staying in Waikato where I grew up. I want to get far away from my parents and what I knew as I could. And Otago had really good degrees in what I did because of the environment that it was in. And so I went down there and did my BSc. Then I did honors, and then I did my masters. And you don't have to keep doing all those things. I just didn't want to stop learning. And there's jobs that come at each of those tiers that you could go do. For example, you could do a BSc and go work for Doc or NIWA or something, or you could do a master's, then work at a different level for Doc or NIWA. Or you could do a PhD and then it opens up another couple of things. I never really, as much as my dad pushed it on me, wanted to be an academic, like a professor in an office, because I started learning the paperwork aspect of that. What you do quickly realize is no matter how much of a job, unless you're like a rock climber for a living, like you spend a lot of time indoors and in offices. 80% of my job is on here doing emails and Zooms. And that's just the reality of getting stuff done. But for me, it was really about, trying to find subjects and then projects in those subjects that got me outside into the coolest places. So there's a pinch point at the end of your BSc where you can either get your degree and move on, or you can go into honors or a master's. And that's when you undertake a project. And that project comes from whatever the supervisors at your university are studying. And, you pick them based on what you think is going to be cooler, really, what you're going to enjoy or what your passions were. And I landed on two. One was sea urchins in Antarctica. And I was like, well, sea urchins aren't necessarily my cup of tea, but Antarctica sounded really, really cool. And it was to do with climate change and a bunch of that stuff. And the other one was bottlenose dolphins in Fiordland, which was a wicked place to go that I'd never been. A wicked topic because it was based on their conservation because they were endangered and a unique subpopulation. But more importantly, it was like a what we call megafauna. It was big animals, and that's what I really appreciated. I think, to be honest, coming from being born in Canada, I moved when I was 4 to New Zealand because mum's a Kiwi, dad's Canadian. We all came over here, but I grew up on the outskirts of Vancouver where when you'd walk the dog, you'd see black bears and you'd see bald eagles and you'd see big raccoons and there was bigger animals. And it was, I guess what, drove me into the David Attenborough side of things, inspiring me like for most people. But at university, I literally pushed play on a VCR and you'd learn from those programs he did. So I ended up picking the bottlenose dolphins in Fiordland. And the only reason I say I couldn't pick it, you apply for it, and I had good grades because I'd worked hard. But more importantly, my supervisor, Steve Dawson, who's a legend in trying to protect Hector's dolphins and Maui's dolphins, is he said, I'm taking you on this project. Like lots of people have your grades, but because I see you're a surfer, and surfers go out, especially in Dunedin, in really challenging conditions and still get it done. And he was like, Fiordland is no joke. It's a very challenging place. And so I know that you'll hack it because the worst thing is someone investing in you and then realizing, the student goes, oh, I don't really like this anymore. And they bail. So it shows how the things you do, even outside of the classroom, really can help your resume, so to speak. So I ended up in Fiordland, studying these dolphins that live in the fjord. There's a big hydroelectric dam that pumps out really hot water into the fjord in summer because it comes from a lake inland, and really cold water in the winter. And it changes the habitat that they have to live in compared to normal. And then there's tourism and then there's fisheries. And so it was looking at how does a small population survive and what are critical areas. And what was wicked for me is that, every 6 weeks I got to go in there and download my little receiver stations that tracked where they went. And that gave me an annual, a year-long exposure to this place that changes so much from summer to winter.
And is that too when Riley, the stat stuff, I'm going back to when you were in school and someone said you need to do stats? Because at that point, even though I'm just trying to think, you're getting the data and information, but to your point, a big part of it is well, what's good if I don't correctly record it and put it somewhere? So what was that also looking like in terms of the, the admin element?
I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Statistics, some people love it, and thank God they do, because I absolutely hated it. I'm really good at maths, but for me, statistics, and I still have carried this through to my academic, career right now, is I've always felt it's very prescribed, and it almost takes away the animal behavior aspect, because you're layering all these numbers and these calculations and you spread it all over like this big piece of toast, and you get something out at the end that I feel is kind of like generic and non-informative, even though it is essential and it is the currency of science. And so on one hand, like I hated it. It didn't emotionally engage me, which was hard for me, but I knew it was necessary, and so I had to do it and pursue at it. Um, but when I got into, say, my PhD, for example, I was like swimming with these animals, these blue sharks that I ended up studying, and I realized there was a lot to them that you could pick up from their behavior. And I could go back to like a class we did in animal behavior where we're just watching a Kia in a cage and what it does. Swimming with these animals, you not only like learned a lot of their behavior, but you got like this empathetic understanding of them. And I call it like the Jane Goodallness kind of, she changed how we did science because she got that aspect of it more than the statistical side, for example. So the combination of those two things is really good. And it meant that when it came to like defending my thesis for my master's or my PhD, the scientists would ask those questions like, yo, why haven't you done this huge statistical analysis? And I said, well, people have done that here. Look at this. Look what they get as an output. It's not that informative. In my case, it wasn't. And whereas what I've done is I've looked at the individual animals and their behavior, and those are the questions I was interested in answering. And this is what I found out. And it gave a bit more of a novel approach than the generic spread the statistical marmite across the toast. And like, I'd be blasphemized in the scientific community almost with that kind of comment, but I think it's important because what it reflected again was me pursuing the areas I enjoyed and working hard at them and justifying them. And that gave a unique perspective on it compared to, say, a status quo kind of approach. And I think that's really underrepresented. Hence, there's only one Jane Goodall kind of person, like that behavioral connection, that empathetic kind of connection with the animals you study is more powerful today than a statistical paper that, 7 people in the scientific community read. And it was kind of the recipe, not to fast track past a bunch of your questions though, that like took me into my PhD and a different kind of approach, which was, using the media and the science, to communicate like hard kind of understandings, but in a way that captured, the public's empathy to help something, even like a shark that most people feared.
Well, and I know we'll get into that, but I want to shout that out because it's what you do, Jane Goodall, David Attenborough, just turned 100, or even you think of Steve Irwin's. There are people who are so well regarded across the world, like without a doubt, and it's because they connect people to animals or to our nature, and everyone's craving it and they want to watch it and learn. So when you're saying that, I love that you said like, yes, love that someone else wants to do the stats because you do need that. But what you did, and we'll ask now, because it sounds like it did inspire you to do the PhD, what did that path look like for you once you did do the honors masters? How did you take that into your PhD?
It made an incredibly challenging track. And I think this is the moral of this whole podcast will be is if you undertake something in your own way, you're going to come up against hurdles that try and force you to do it in the conventional status quo way. And what I mean by that is like you talk to the three heroes of natural world right now, Steve, they're the ones we all watched and all loved. And what I saw that I really struggled with was you look at Attenborough, he's been preaching that message in a really nice way for a long time, and yet the worlds are still doing their own thing, doing it in the wrong way, and not really action and care about it. And for me, that's really demoralizing because we all know it's the right thing to do. Actually getting it done in the real world is what I saw as the big hurdle, the big challenge. And so I did a TED Talk on this, which was basically the story of my PhD, which in the first instance was I got straight A's all through school, all through university. I had like an 89% average at uni, which is quite hard. And to do a PhD, you need a scholarship. So I applied for one. And that year, John Key had amalgamated the international scholarships with the New Zealand ones, which means you're competing with everyone from overseas, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But how do you best say this? There's people who work really hard at getting academic degrees, but have no like social skills, no ability to like communicate it, to use it, to make it actually worthy of what those grades were. And so I didn't get a scholarship. And for 18 months. Every 6 months you'd apply for it. 18 months I was sitting at home at my parents' place, not on my bum doing video games, like I said. I was laboring and working and doing a bunch of stuff. And more importantly, looking up all the things I needed to do for my PhD, basically working on it already. Eventually got to a point where my supervisor to be was like, can you do this without a scholarship? And I said, yeah. And I had no idea how to do it. But I knew I was going to do it because what I was trying to fight for was like shark finning of blue sharks and around the world, and realized New Zealand was shockingly a leader in shark finning. And that was that purpose side of things. If you've got a purpose for something and a passion for it, the purpose is what enables you to pursue it because it's bigger than your own interest. And the key point about a purpose, if it's for something good and especially on a big scale, other people get behind it. So what I ended up doing with my PhD is I just kind of started it without even starting it. And I started taking out news people on boats, swimming with the blue sharks like I had learned to, and changing their fear to fascination. And then therefore the people who were watching that TV also picked up on that and were like, oh my goodness, like look at what's happening. We've got to do something about this. And out of that woodwork came, support for the satellite tags that we needed, which were not cheap. A philanthropist guy who was just passionate about the ocean said, hey, how can I help you out? He had a boat. He gave me an allowance, for my rent. And he enabled me, in laps of a scholarship to undertake this. And that was the biggest hurdle in my career, was getting over that. How do I do my PhD without a scholarship? And what I learned, like I said before, was with a purpose that's beyond yourself and is better for the world, other people come in and support it. And that was a recipe that I learned and that worked very well because we tagged and tracked these sharks. We told their story. Schools all around New Zealand got behind it. Big corporates here in New Zealand, like stuff like that, got behind it. A whole bunch of NGOs, we all aligned. And eventually it wasn't me, it was we, collectively got shark finning banned in 2014. And that was just like, I was like, oh my God. And at that point, I just about finished my PhD. And I remember this old guy came up to me when we were celebrating the ban of shark finning. He'd worked for Greenpeace or something like that. And he was like, mate, you need to really value this moment because conservation successes are unfortunately very rare in this world. And he's like, the recipe, the way you've done this, though, has been very quick and successful, and you should carry that through. And that is what I did. I took that recipe to Western Australia where they were culling sharks, and we helped get that banned. And we did that by not like pointing and blaming and, doing statistics or science. Like those were all parts of it. But my part was going out into the water with the sharks that I knew and showing the people what they were. And we ended up saving this baby tiger shark that had been caught and released alive and it was going to die. And we rescued it and on TV, and then people saw it and like, what? And so then their ears were open to what was the message we're actually trying to say, which was there's better paths to keep people safe from sharks than killing them. And, it's a recipe I've really carried through to today, which is utilizing that visual media laced with science. And that's a lesson I fundamentally learned, from David Attenborough. He's the guru at that.
So this, I don't want to take it for granted. It becomes clear your career, when did it become one?
If career is defined by when you get paid, which it probably is, not until I started doing TV shows, which is the irony of it. Because like doing a PhD, you're not earning money, you're scraping by. And ironically, at the end of my PhD, a colleague who lives in town here still with me, Mike Barner, who was like a guru, TV producer, filmmaker, and like swam with sharks. Yeah, exactly. I've got it right up here on the shelf too. Yeah. Mike saw me and was like, hey man, we got this guy's boat. We're going and filming marlin, doing something on. If you come and be a decky on the side, we might be able to tag some sharks. And because he was filming that for a TV project, when I started tagging the sharks, started filming it, he's like, tell us what you're doing. And I started just saying it. And he picked up on, and this isn't egotistical, but like a natural talent, I guess I had to Steve Irwin kind of something, on camera, explain in an enthusiastic manner what you're doing, why, and that was, appealing to people to see. And we created a TV show called Sharkman TV way back in the day. And it was about like 10 different shark species around New Zealand, Australia. And Again, my philanthropist who helped me through the PhD, he helped fund this, and it was bare bones kind of stuff. Like, it wasn't earning money, but it was enough to pay your rent. I learned how to partake in the TV world. And out of that, someone must have seen one of those, and I got a call one day to narrate a Shark Week show for Discovery Channel. And I went and did that, and ironically, it was with one of the biggest shark scientists in the world, Greg Stonewall, who, ironically, I just read his book recently. He'd gone through a very similar path to where I've gone and am still going on, and it was really, really cool. I got paid like $1,000 and a free dinner in a hotel, and for me at that time, I was like, "That's wicked, wow!" And I can tell you, I've come a long way since then. But the same recipe, learnings, reason to do it have still stuck, and TV has become how I earn my living. But more importantly, it is the enabler of my science to do my science independently from corporations or industry that are generally creating a lot of the problems that you're trying to address. So, to put that more simply, if you do a career in marine biology at university, 99% of the people sitting beside me doing my PhD were answering questions for industries like, how do we catch more snapper? How do we address this issue with the fishery we're exploiting? It was because they're making money so they can spend money to make more money. To understand why whales go here or there or sharks go here or there is a rare type of marine science, especially in New Zealand, to be funded, because it's coming from pure interest sake and the benefit of that knowledge sake. And that's hard to fund because there's not a direct avenue of money to fund it. So what I learned with the TV recipe was you could get money to go do something. You'd have to do it in a creative, entertaining way, but in the backdrop of that, you're getting the money for the tags, for the time on the boat. And what I still say today, even stronger than ever, to the TV producer in the office who makes the call on to fund something or not, is if you don't fund these tags for this show, I won't have anywhere to come up with an idea for the next one. You know, by doing the science, you generate more knowledge. Oh, wow, look, they all went over here. Well, what's over here? You know, there's your next show. And so it works really well together because the TV enables the science and the science enables the TV. And ultimately, both those things are educating the public about an animal that otherwise wouldn't be looked at beyond, you know, what little science can get done about them.
So would you describe yourself, are you kind of a freelance person producing shows, and are most of them overseas? Or not?
First question, yeah, 100% for it's the most. I could never work for someone whether because I would never survive, because I've now learned to like kind of think for myself and I'd be a pain in their ass. Or you know, I think it's because I've seen the niche where I can address questions that others either contractually can't because they work for the industry. And that's a big thing I saw with shark issues. I got called to Australia heaps of times to go over there and stick up for the sharks because the scientists who wanted to, who studied them, were employed by the very government that was killing them for a political reason, for public safety. So I learned that it was very valuable to be able to be independent. Like a Matt Watson, for example, is that kind of person who, you know, isn't in the fishing industry, but is entirely in the fishing industry. But he will call it like for what it is. And that's a very powerful thing. It exposes you. You cop a lot of crap for it, like from those industries. And you've seen it with him, especially recently. But the following you have from decades of entertaining and educating people in the right way, like he does, brings you a credibility that the industries can't take away from you by, you know, muting you with a contract. And so for me, the first part of my question, your question was, yeah, I'm entirely independent and entirely enabled by the public, whether it be sponsoring tags individually or by paying for your Netflix or whatever Discovery Channel subscription, which then gives the money to the TV to enable shows to be made. So that's been really cool. So realistically, if you say, how do I earn a living? I earn a living from making TV shows. I don't do the career for the sake of making TV. What I love about it is like I'm in New Zealand making TV shows largely for America, but it goes globally to hundreds of millions of people. But it means like I kind of don't have to live in that world. I get to live in this one, but I partake in that world, and that world with scale outside of New Zealand is much larger. And what's quite cool is at the start, it was a lot of international shows. Like I did series in the Bahamas, I did series in South Africa, Australia, a bunch of different places. And that was cool. But COVID brought a lot of stuff home. And it meant that you had to do shows inside your own country and with your own local crews, film crews, which has actually ended up being a blessing in disguise and really, really good because number one, working with New Zealanders, I really enjoy it. And it's people who are very like-minded and you can work very efficiently. But also it enabled me to really highlight how amazing New Zealand is. We have some of the best sharks in the world, the least studied, the most exploited. And ironically, when it comes to my big subject these days, the great white shark, we're one of 5 places on Earth that they actually aggregate every year. And most of those other 5 have disappeared or in trouble. And New Zealand's a really healthy one, but it's facing its own issues. So I'm driven more than ever to like showcase our local animals and do science that monitors them for their benefit.
Can you talk me through this constant dance you must have to do? We've got great whites, which is obviously the most famous shark, I suppose. Their danger, their strength, their predatory nature, but you need to protect, preserve, and they're important. How do you play that? Because it must be a tough sell at times.
And I think you add the other layer, like you've got behind you and I do me, is when you're a surfer, like the risk is real and it's there. And to answer the simple question, I'm still scared of sharks, 100%. And I say to people, you should be. Like it's you. If someone said I'm not scared of a lion or a bear or a crocodile, you'd be like, why are you crazy? And of any place, the ocean is like not our playground. Like we are land-based animals, and the fear we have of them is real because it does happen tragically, in places every time of year. But it's about the context of that fear, like I say to people, which is still a really hard one when you tell them that cars and vending machines and all those things kill more people than sharks. The shark is literally the boogeyman because people don't see it, they don't understand it. It is under the bed, so to speak, when you're surfing. It's terrifying. But I say to people, like, a mountaineer doesn't go into the mountain not understanding what an avalanche is. And you can choose to stay on the ski field, on the green run in Happy Valley and be 100% safe, so to speak. Or you can choose that that's not your cup of tea. You want more risk, you want more adventure. So you go hike the summit to get that fresh run. And to do that, you'd be an idiot not to understand the risks that are involved with that. I say to people, nature is dangerous and it's that risk that makes it thrilling. Because if it was a cakewalk, well, you'd be it would be a pool or it would be a ski run. So it's that innate risk of nature that makes it thrilling. And it means you have to be prepared for it. And the unfortunate thing with sharks is for some reason, we treat the ocean like a pool and we go into it with, an approach like that. That's just why so many people drown. It's like going skiing for that avalanche place, but you don't even know how to ski. People go into the ocean, they don't even know how to swim or read the risks in the ocean. So I bring it back to your question, which is I try and rationalize my fear of sharks and the risk of it. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing I've learned is that I'm probably more scared of sharks now than I ever was because I'm not ignorant and I'm not naive to the risks, which is what a surfer generally lives off of. Like we know you don't go out there and talk to the guy, hey, how sharky do you think it is today? Whereas like a ski guy will be like, what's the avalanche report? So it is a funny one when it comes to surfing, but I think as more and more millions of us go into the ocean, and we still have shark attacks, unbelievably not going up in proportion to that amount of people going to the ocean, but it's still there. We're starting to try and seek answers or mitigation tactics for those risks through better understanding of ourselves, the environment, and the animals. And science is a massive part of that. So to bring your question in one, I still have a huge conflicting lifestyle, but it is one that is super powerful because when I go talk to a surfing community or a diving community or a shark community, I live in all those worlds and I partake in all those things. So I'm not a hypocrite. I'm someone who understands why you surf. And I can understand that when you then try and implement a shark policy, for example. And it means someone can't really call you out and be like, you don't understand this aspect or something like, and it goes the same with the sharks. I can stand up for them and say what they do for the ecosystem versus a surfer hates sharks just because we don't need them. And it's like, well, yes, no, we do, because they do this for the ocean. So it's been a really powerful one, but it is 100% conflicting. As an example, I was just editing a Shark Week show yesterday, great whites doing what they do for TV. And then I went surfing, and you're sitting there like everyone else having a great time. And I know there's no great whites really where I surf here, but like you see a piece of seaweed and you can't help envision what you just saw on the screen on your computer. So it's one that's 100% worth it, because overall I'm educated to what the risk is, what the importance of that animal is, how awesome surfing is, how awesome that environment is. And I'm willing to take that risk and accept it, which most surfers and divers and ocean people are. And which is why I've worked with so many people who've been bitten by sharks and survived, or people have been beside people who haven't. And none of them are like, I don't like sharks. All of them were like, we knew the risk, and surfing's just so awesome, we're willing to take that risk. And I never blame the shark. So those are the people who truly walk the talk. And I think that's the most powerful. And that's why we use a lot of those people, as collaborators on our shows, because when they speak it, you kind of go, well, I can't fault that,
And I think there's a part of what people are seeing with your personality, and that there's another side to it. And we talked off air slightly about this, about a young girl who did lose her life at Waihi, but people probably don't realize you had to be involved in the aftermath of that as an expert.
It was challenging, and it was challenging on a variety of things. Firstly, the context of this was in Tauranga Harbour, where like there were never great whites really historically. And all of a sudden, in like 2020, little great whites were being seen regularly in the harbor. And I was like, I live in Tidor, so I can literally almost see Bowen Town from here. And I was like, that's kind of crazy. It's kind of fate, and a weird fate in a way, that the things I'm so passionate about have landed in my backyard. And so I was like, I need to study them because I got the tools to do it. But at the same time, I just had my young girl, and I was like, if I got a kid in that area, I want to know what those sharks are doing. What's the risk? What's happening? Like we can't just go, oh, whoa, we need to understand it, because they were getting more and more prevalent. And I applied for a dock permit, and dock is quite a slow moving beast as far as, getting stuff done, because it's just sadly an underfunded government department, and hence the things I said earlier about industry. And what was hardest for me is I waited 1.5 years to get the permit to try and start giving the public some answers. And I was going down there and doing talks and trying to give them information based on experience, but not actual data. And I'd seen, and in 1 week, I saw 12 great whites in there. And I was like, this is very novel. And largely they were small sharks. They were newborn 1.2 meters up to like 2.5 meters. And those sharks aren't dangerous really to people. They eat stingrays and crabs and kingfish. And, it's when they get 3 meters plus and they move their diet to seals, and humans all of a sudden look like a seal, and you get into trouble. And unfortunately, when I was waiting for that permit, the girl got washed out in a rip at Bowen Town on the beach end, and, sucked out in a rip. Her friends got rescued. She was 500 meters offshore, and she was in trouble. And that panicking in nature is, predators, oh, there's something vulnerable there. And she got bit, and unfortunately she passed away. And the people who had to address that, the young lifeguards, the teenagers, the doctor on site, I was asked to, kind of get the police report, interview it, and dissect what happened. And that was really hard, because it was summer. I was sitting there on the beach with my young kid. This was in my backyard now. This wasn't in a country overseas. It wasn't at a seal colony. It was really, really quite confronting. And talking to the doctor, who doesn't go swimming in the ocean anymore now, because he was there first on the scene. And I saw the pictures. I had to look at the wounds to determine how big the shark was, what species it was. It was very confronting. And for me, that's something I took into my toolkit going forward whenever I address shark attacks in local communities, because it hits hard. And it is tragic, and it's beyond tragic from a car crash or something like that, because people have almost accepted that that's part of life, whereas a boogeyman is not. And for me, that, again, I come back to that purpose, drove me even harder to persist at dock, to get my permit, which I then was able to get done, tag these sharks, start learning about them, seeing that there were some larger sharks in there, and we were starting to learn about their movement. And then ironically, like nature took it away. You know, we had those huge floods, Gabriel and the Auckland anniversary one, and that spewed a whole bunch of sediment into that harbor, and they all migrated out, went around to the West Coast, and they never came back. And they still haven't come back to this day. And so in a way, it was like this sad kind of double-edged sword, because a great white nursery ground is a very novel, rare, and super important thing for this endangered and very important animal for an ecosystem. And I equivalent it to like when you chop down a hedge and you see that there was a bird nest in there, and you're like, oh God, sorry, mate. And then like the bird will come back and like it can't nest in there because the tree hasn't got leaves and hasn't formed. And then one year the tree grows back and then the bird can nest in it again. This is probably what happened with the great whites. They used to nest in there and pup in there. And then we industrially developed it with kiwi fruit farms and dairy orchards and sediment. And then they worked really hard to get that harbor healthy, and it was fishing very well. And the great white mum probably came past one year and was like, oh, whoa, that tree grew back. And all of a sudden you saw this thing that's actually reflective of a very healthy ecosystem, but you've got people towing sea biscuits and kids over the top of them now, and that brings up a different kind of risk. And that was literally what I was seeing. And it was quite confronting. And yet no one there was like, we need to get rid of these sharks because we play here. Everyone there, as most Kiwis are, very oceanic, very respectful of nature, and they wanted to know, to be informed, to make their own decisions. And I brought back that recipe of the blue shark in my PhD, where we took the public out and through media. People funded the tags. When a great white's got a name like Daisy, it wasn't so scary to people, and they could learn about it. And you know, we broke down that fear, and more importantly, like, I think to the tragic loss for that family, we addressed a question rather than just leaving it floating out there and they would never get closure. You know, it was through knowledge and information, they were able to understand what happened and how brutal nature can be. But, you know, it was the place where she loved to go, and most of us do. And so it didn't ruin nature for a lot of people. It informed us about it. And I think, you know, that's the important thing about science, is that it gives people the ability, if they're, you know, open to it, to learn about things around them, even one of the most scariest things out there that we least understand.
Do you feel you have to watch what you say? Like, obviously you've mentioned the sediment and the sharks are gone. Of course, now there's people going, oh, thank God for that. And they're back there. But you'll be like, oh, no, I didn't. Is that how it works?
You can see me looking up and down every now and then when I talk, because you as a surfer, as a shark person, as the fact that sharks do tragic things every now and then, you got to be very careful what you say. But especially when you're in the media, and like they can misconstrue it at times. But I've got a good trust in New Zealand media. We're very good compared to Australia, for example. But I learned that the hard way to pivot. The very first interview I ever did was, unfortunately, a shark attack in Muriwai, which was in 2013. And I was, again, crazily, ironically close to it. I'd surfed the very point he'd swum around. I started paddling around that point the night before, and I saw all of the fish, the burley, the birds. I was like, I got an instinct. I was like, this feels weird. I turned around and went back, and the next evening he swam around there and unfortunately got bit by a great white. And I went on the news and I saw helicopter footage of this great white swimming around, and I was like, that's a great white, but it's not the shark that attacked him. We didn't know who had attacked him yet, but like by the behavior of this animal and the size of it, I could see that it was unlikely. And yet the news cut my words and put it the other way around to say, this is the shark and this is what did it. And it was a lesson I learned about controlling media, generally at the start doing live media, until you get a relationship with journalists that were trustworthy with what you say. And that's very important, because you can burn your credibility, so to speak, in the public if you get misconstrued the wrong way, or you say the wrong things even. So dancing that line is definitely a skill I learned, because you're dealing with, you know, emotionally gearing things. But at the same time, you can't sugarcoat some stuff. Like, I love the fact that I do a lot of these activities. So I say to people, look, man, if you don't want risk, go in the swimming pool. You know, it's not your right to go into nature and mitigate all the risks. And it is the biggest point of shark issues, other than shark finning and fisheries, is like in places like Australia. Like, a shark of mine I tagged down here in Stewart Island just popped up in Queensland, where there's hundreds of drum lines and shark nets. And if that goes into one of those, it gets shot and killed. And it's just like, it's a protected species, even in Australia. So you gotta you got to call things for what they are, not be afraid to do that. Stand up for things like what's going on with fisheries at the moment, where someone like Matt Watson is copying it, but he's standing up for what is right. That is inspiring. And politicians, this is the biggest thing I've kind of struggled with. Politicians literally need to do their job, which is they have a job because we put them there. We're their bosses. And they kind of forget that. And they dilly-dally around and they don't address these issues as well as they should. But what we're just doing too wrong, and it's the sad part of what I see with David Attenborough's lifelong mission, is the industries just don't seemingly listen. And they just keep doing the wrong things. But I'm not ending this on a bad moral story because David Attenborough never does. I had 2 conservation success stories, shark finning and a WA shark cull, and I continue to use those as drivers that you can make the change. You just have to have the purpose and the passion and work hard. It is not easy. It is exhausting. And even with this fisheries bill at the moment, I was like, oh my goodness, I got to get back into this. And it is sapping. But do you care enough? Have you put yourself in a position where you've got the tools to help? And this is a purpose worthy of self-sacrifice, well, then it's your job, it's your responsibility to do that, because a surgeon doesn't turn away from a kid in a car crash. He gets it done. She gets it done. A teacher doesn't just write you off because you misbehaved at 14 through adolescence. You know, the good ones I had actually sat you down and gave you an ultimatum. Look, you can go this way or this way. As a kid, it's important to be aware of that and listen and be open-minded. You're going to stuff up. You're going to get in trouble. You know, you're going to get detention or get it, you know, whatever. Can you learn from those mistakes and absorb the opportunities and advice you get so you can proliferate, find that thing you like, find that thing that is purpose, and then work really hard to get good at it, because we need more good people at things with purpose.
What a place to end it. There's a couple of things just as I sign off, and Grace asked your last question. This has been fascinating. I didn't know you were down at Tyra. I hope you got that swell on the weekend.
Yeah, mate, it was very good.
It was great, eh? One thing I picked up, you know, there was a statement you made, didn't want to stop learning. And I think that's a really wonderful message. If kids do whatever they do, whether that be into the trades or into the academia, that idea of always learning just seems such a passionate thing and just such a wonderful thing you said. And I go to a quote, a ship in harbour is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. And that's a little bit where I act in terms of the surfing or traveling the world surfing. You know, yeah, I could sit in my house all day long and I might be safer, but what a shitty life that would be. And yeah, look, I just want to congratulate you on the work you do. And the advocacy you put out, because yeah, we interviewed Matt last week, and I know the battle he's taking on, and you know, I know you and you guys put up a great fight. But in terms of kids sitting there with real aspirations, real sort of desire to learn, particularly that natural world, what a wonderful example. Thank you so much for having you today, because it's been just a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. The questions you've asked have been really, really good. And the background research, the hard work you've done to ask the right questions is really, really good. And I think it's really important for kids who are watching this, don't be like, well, he does marine biology and sharks and I'm not doing that. That's not the point of whatever I've said today. It's that, like, I've got mates that I went to high school with that became builders and plumbers and tradies, and they are doing really, really good because they got the skill, then they worked hard at it. They moved up from apprentice to like top builder, to then starting their own company, taking that huge risk, doing their statistics, which would have been having to learn how to do finance and budgeting and taking on a loan and having the balls to do it. And they took those risks because they backed their skills, and their purpose was putting people into houses when they needed them. You know, they weren't doing it for the money or the greed. And the successful ones are because they did it well and interacted with their community and their clients and their people. And I built a house recently, and like, they didn't treat me like that. And so I wouldn't recommend them and work with them. And those people don't succeed in those businesses. So no matter what it is that you're doing, it's about finding that thing you like, finding the purpose in it, because that is your ability to scale it. And then the whole big thing is doing the mahi, working really hard at it. But like I said, work is so easy and enjoyable if you like it and are interested in it. So the biggest lesson I want anyone from this is that this ain't about marine biology or me and sharks. It's about what is the recipe to end up being at my age or anyone's age, and you're still really enjoying what you're doing, and you still want to know more.
I love that. And the last question we always ask is back to you because you just gave advice literally for anyone. But if you could go back to yourself when you were in year 13, 7th form, and it was just Riley to Riley, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say, like, in all honesty, and it sounds bad, but like I think I did the right thing. I think I had the right people around me. I took on the right advice. I was smart enough to take opportunities and do the work that enabled me to get the opportunities when they came. And I got really lucky. I got through things in unique ways. And I think the biggest advice I would be is almost like sharing that with my friends, like not in an egotistical way, but like encouraging your friends to be like, hey man, let's go look for that. Let's go find that. Like, do you need help with that? How are you feeling about what you're doing? It's something you only learn when you get older. Is like when I catch up with my uni mates, is how are you guys doing? You know, like, oh, you're struggling with the same thing as me. Because like depression and stuff like that wasn't a topic, you know, anxiety wasn't a topic. And kids these days have so much more on their plate than we did. We didn't even have cell phones, you know. And I listened to a podcast with Jonah Hill the other day, who's the funny guy of Superbad and does a bunch of cool stuff now. And he said the reason he like got off social media and started looking into mental health and sharing that was because he saw his kids had as much anxiety through social media as he was carrying as a super famous person. And it was because every time they did something and shared it, they were being judged by the world on social media. And the biggest thing I'd do is at that age, like being a kid nowadays, talking to a kid my age nowadays is a better question, I think, because it was a different world when I was that old, is strip it back to the simple stuff, man. Go out and play in nature. That is the biggest driver. Kids spend like 7% of their time in nature and 7 hours a day on social media. So like, get out in nature, talk to your friends about how you feel. Don't be shy. Don't feel pressure. Just have fun and free yourself to take on whatever opportunities come, because it is never too late. You can change careers at my age, but at your age, there is no expectation. Just try everything, travel, taste, play, enjoy, get out of nature, and just be a kid, because the rest of that stuff out there in the world, you know what, your brain isn't meant to have it all in there. Okay, so just have fun, go play in nature and enjoy your life, and you'll figure out who you are. And with that, then you can zone in on how to get good at it.
Brilliant.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
An absolute pleasure, mate. Take care. Maybe I'll see you in the water sometime. Don't take my waves, but it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, guys, no, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the questions and the time. And yeah, it was a really enjoyable experience. So cheers.